Today I'm going to read Salvatore by W. Somerset Maugham. I wonder if I could do it. I knew Salvatore first when he was a boy of 15 with a pleasant smile, a laughing mouth, and a carefree eyes. He used to spend the morning lying about the beach with next to nothing on his brown body and was as thin as a rail. He was full of grace. He was in and out of the seas all the times, swimming with the clumsy, effortless stroke common to the fisher boys. Scrambling up the jagged rocks on his hard feet, for except on Sundays, he never wore shoes. He would throw himself into the deep water with a cry of delight. His father was a fisherman who owned his little vineyard, and Salvatore acted as a nursemaid to his two younger brothers. He shouted to them to come inshore when he ventured out too far and made them dress when he was at times to climb the hot, wind-slant hill for the frugal midday meal. But boys in those southern parts grow apace, and in a little while he was madly in love with a pretty girl who lived on the Grande Marina. She had eyes like forest pools and held herself like the daughter of the Caesar. They were affianced, but they could not marry till Salvatore had done his military services. And when he left the island, which he had never left in his life before, to become a sailor in the navy of King Victor and Emmanuel, he wept like a child. It was hard for one who had never been less free than the bird to be at the beck and call of others. It was harder still to live in a battleship with strangers instead of a little white cottage among the vines, and when he was ashore, to walk in noisy, friendless cities with streets so crowded that he was frightened to cross them. When he had been used to silent paths and the mountains and the seas, I suppose it had been never struck him that Ischia, which he looked at every morning, it like a fairy island in the sunset, to see what the weather would be like next day, or Vesuvius, pearly in the dawn, had anything to do with him at all. But when he ceased to have them before his eyes, he realized in some dim fashion that they were as much part of him as his hands and his feet. He was dreadfully homesick, but it was hardest of all to be parted with the girl he loved with all his passion, young heart. He wrote her in his childlike handwriting long, ill-spelled letters in which he told how constantly he thought of her and how much he longed to be back. He was sent here and there, to Spezia, to Venice, to Bari, and finally to China. Here he felt ill of some mysterious ailment that kept him in hospital for months. He bore it with his mute and uncomprehending patience of a dog. When he learned that he was a form of rheumatism that made him unfit for further services, his heart exulted, for he could go home. And he did not bother. In fact, he scarcely listened when the doctor told him that he would never again be quite well. What did he care when the girl was going back to the little island he loved so well and the girl who was waiting for him? When he got into the rowing boat that met the steamers from Naples and was rowed ashore, he saw his father and mother standing on the jetty and his two brothers, big boys now, and he waved to them. His eyes searched among the crowd that waited there for the girl he would not see. There was a great deal of kissing when he jumped up to the steps, and they all emotional creatures cried a little when they exchanged their greetings. He asked where the girl was. His mother told him that she did not know, that had not seen her for 2 or 3 weeks. So in the evening, when the moon was shining over the placid sea and the lights of Naples twinkled in the distance, he walked down to the Grande Marine to her house. She was sitting on the doorstep with her mother. He was a little shy because he had not seen her for so long. He asked her if she had not received the letter that he had written to her, saying that he is coming home. Yes, they had received a letter when they had been told by another of the island boys that he was ill. Yes, that was why he was back. And it was not a piece of luck. Oh, but they had heard that he would never be quite well again. The doctor talked a lot nonsense, but he knew very well that now he was home again, he would recover. They were silent for a little, and then the mother nudged the girl. She did not try to soften the blow. She told him straight out, with the blunt directness of a race, that she could not marry a man who would never be strong enough to walk like a man. They had made up her minds, her mother and her father, and she and her father would never give consent. When Salvatore went home, he found that he knew the girl's father had been to tell them what they had decided, but they had lacked the courage to tell him by themselves. He wept on his mother's bosom. He was terribly unhappy, but he did not blame the girl. A fisherman's life is hard and it needs strength and endurance. He knew very well that a girl would not afford to marry a man who might not be able to support her. His mind was very sad and his eyes had the look of a dog that he had been beaten. But he did not complain, and he never said a word of the girl that he had loved so well. Then, a few months later, when he had settled down to the common round, working in his father's vineyard and fishing, his mother told him that there was a young woman in the village who was willing to marry him. Her name was Assunta. She was as ugly as a devil, he said. She was older than he, 24 or 25, and had been engaged to a man who, while doing his military services, had been killed in Africa. She had a little money of her own, and if Salvatore married her, she would buy him a boat on his own, and they could get a vineyard that, by happy chances, happened at that moment to be without a tenant. His mother told him that Assunta had seen him at the festa and had fallen in love with him. Salvatore smiled his sweet smile and said that he would think about it. On the following Sunday, dressed in stiff black clothes in which he looked so much less well dressed than in the rag shirt and trousers of every day, he went up to the hill mast at the parish church and placed himself so that he could have good luck at the young woman. When he came down again, he told his mother that he was willing. Well, they were married and they settled down in a tiny whitewashed house in the middle of a handsome vineyard. Salvatore was now a great big husky fellow, tall and broad, but still with his indigenous smile and those trusting, kindly eyes that he had as a boy. He had the most beautiful manners I've ever seen in my life. Assunta was a grim-visaged female with decided features, and she looked old for her years, but by the little smile of devotion that she gave her husband when he was being very masculine and masterful, she never ceased to be touched by his gentle sweetness. But she could not bear the girl who had thrown him over, and notwithstanding Salvatore's smiling explosions, she had nothing but harsh words for her. Presently, children were born to them. It was a hard enough life. All through the fishing season, towards evening, he set out in his boat and one of his brothers for the fishing grounds. It was a long pull of 6 to 7 miles, and he spent the night catching the profitable cuttlefish. Then there was the long row back in order to sell the catches in time for it to go on to the early boat to Naples. At other time, he was walking in his vineyard from dawn to dusk till heat and drove him to rest, and then again. when it was a trifle cooler till dusk. Often his rheumatism prevented him from dodging anything at all, and then he would lie about the bench smoking cigarettes with a pleasant word for everyone, notwithstanding the pain he racked in his limbs. The foreigner who came down to bathe and saw him there said that these Italian fishermen were lazy devils. Sometimes he used to bring his children down to give them a bath. They were both boys, and at that time the elder was 3 and the younger less than 2. They sprawled about at the water's edge shark naked, and Salvatore, standing on a rock, would dip them in water. The elder one bore at with stoicism, but the baby screamed lustily. Salvatore has enormous hands, like legs of mutton, coarse and hard from constant toil. But when he bathed his children, holding them so tenderly, drying them with delicate care, upon my words, they were like flowers. He would see the naked babies on the palm of his hands and hold him up, laughing a little at his smallness. And his laugh was like the laughter of an angel, his eyes that were as candid as his child's. I started by saying that I wonder if I could do it, and now I must tell you what it is that I have tried to do. I wanted to see whether I could hold your attention for a few pages while I drew for you the portrait of a man, just an ordinary fisherman, possessed nothing in the world except a quality which is the rarest, the most precious, and the loveliest that anyone can have. Heaven only knows why he should strangely and unexpectedly have possessed it. All I know is that it shone in him, and with a radiance that, if it had not been unconsciousness and so humble, would have been to the common run of men hardly bearable. And in case you have not guessed what the quality is, I'll tell you. Goodness, just goodness. Thank you.